Hello and welcome to my office. My name is Kevin. I'm part of the Gastivist Collective. We are a small horizontal collective dedicated to supporting grassroots groups in fighting gas. We think it's super strategic to be stopping gas infrastructure now before it's built, and especially see this as deeply connected to overthrowing dominant systems of oppression, financial, social, in many other ways. So today we're going to be having a quick workshop to talk about gas narratives, to look at actually what are the different stories being told around fossil gas or natural gas, as the industry loves to call it, and look at some of the stories the industry is telling, and then also looking at some of the stories that movements are telling to push back and reframe these stories around gas. So I've got a presentation that I'll be sharing with you now. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation. Yep, here we go. So, okay, let's just move this thing around here. Hold on, technical problems shouldn't happen. Okay, so as I said, here we go. Let's make sure we start on the right slide. Okay, cool. So you should be sharing my screen. Or no, you should not be sharing my screen. You should see my screen. And cool. So here we go. Let's jump right into it. Gas narratives. Clean gas is a dirty lie. As I said, we're going to look at some of the different stories that the industry is telling us about gas as a clean bridge fuel to a renewable energy future, whereas we actually know natural gas is actually just methane, a greenhouse gas that's already underground. It should stay underground, and this methane can be more than 100 times more potent than CO2 while it's in the atmosphere. So it's a supercharged greenhouse gas already underground. All we have to do is leave it there. But let's look at some of the stories being told. But I want to just introduce a quick concept before we start called reframe. And this is about how we can be shifting the frame of a story. And this is a way in which we can be more successful in our campaigns by making sure that we're talking about what we want the people to be talking about and not defending or challenging what the industry wants to be talking about. Whoever defines the terms of the debate is more likely to win the argument. The surest way to win an argument is to reframe the terms of the debate. So let's look at a few examples of that before we get into the gas stuff. You're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. This is a different way of relocating your position in the story. Suddenly you're not the victim, you're not, I'm stuck in traffic, you're the protagonist. You are traffic. So we're looking for these sort of narrative flips that we can be making that really change the entire story just by changing the narrative. And let's look at environmental narrative around climate, typically very common. We're probably familiar with most of them. Save the earth, the earth is something that is being harmed. We don't know by who, but we need to save it and come together. It's placing the power on us as the humans that know how to save it, have the knowledge. We're the ones that will come and be the protagonists. The earth is sort of a passive victim in the story. And you can save lots of stuff. You can save the climate, you can save the Arctic, you can save the world, you can save the polar bears, you can save the trees, you can save the planet. But all of these are sort of reaffirming that hierarchy of power, that whoever's doing the saving knows more, is more legitimate, is more empowered than whoever's being saved. It's kind of condescending, and this kind of frame leads to a lot of the white saviorism that we often see with specifically white nations trying to save other people from the problems that rich nations themselves have created. So another way to look at that same frame is the earth isn't dying, it's being killed. And those who are killing it have names and addresses, as this wise rabbit tells us. So that's changing the dynamic of the story. It's suddenly the earth isn't randomly dying, it's being killed. It's the victim not of sort of a passive act, but of an aggressive, intentional act. And it introduces this other character, and question around who is killing it. And so suddenly the protagonist is not who's been saving the earth, but the protagonist thus becomes who is killing the earth. Another way to reframe the same story is save the humans. This reallocates humans into the story. If we're not just the saviors, but we're also the ones that need to be saved. We're both savior and victim. We have invested interest in this, and we're not outside of who we're saving. And still another way to look at the same story is we are nature defending itself, as the fantastic project Climate Games introduced this slogan into the movement. Suddenly, this has relocated humans as part of nature. We're not outside of the earth, and we are some outside being that will come in and save it. Rather, we are part of nature, and we're not saving it or killing it, we're defending it. And that's switched to talking about defense rather than saving. Is quite an important narrative switch. And when we talk about fighting fossil fuel industry and infrastructure around the world, so often we see this is the language that Indigenous and local communities are using around defending their water, defending their land. And it gives you a great place of legitimacy, because it reaffirms that what you're working towards is already yours and someone's trying to take it away. So just to give one example of this is a group that I'm a huge fan of, the Pacific Climate Warriors. These are climate organizers from all across the small island Pacific states, and doing amazing work. And they tell good stories. This story is how 30 climate warriors took on the biggest export coal port in the world and won. So again, they're setting up this great story. It's, the unlikely hero, 30 people against the biggest coal port in the world. Seems impossible that they're going to win, but they do. And in this project, they built traditional boats across the islands of the Pacific and brought them to Australia, where for a whole day, they blockaded the port with help of lots of allies. And the Pacific Warriors, they did this action, because they realized that they were being framed as the victims in the story. It was, we have to save the Marshall Islands, we have to save Vanuatu, we have to save Tuvalu. And they said, hold on a second. We come from a warrior culture. We are descendants of the greatest navigators on the planet. We don't need you outsiders coming in and saving us from a problem you created. We need to be repositioned as the leaders, as the saviors, as the people that have protected the knowledge that will get us out of this problem. So by doing this action and adopting the slogan, we're not drowning, we are fighting, they became active agents in the story they were telling. So I give this example to think about different ways in which we can be changing the power structures of the stories we are in, and making sure that we're not accepting the power structures provided by industry around how they've decided to frame an issue. And they can either frame it around jobs or climate or energy security or many things, as we're about to see. So what are the industry narratives? How do they try to justify the fact that they're digging up a greenhouse gas and calling it progress? Well, one of the stories they tell is that gas is a perfect companion to renewable energy. Here, we're going to be looking at a number of different gas advertisements. When the wind does not blow, when the sun does not shine, gas, that's who's there. It's reliable. It'll fill in the gaps when renewables can't. No wind, no sun, no problem, use gas. Uniper says it pretty clearly there. Another story they're telling is that gas is clean. It's the responsible way to keep doing whatever the hell we want to the planet. And they like putting in pictures of like this young lady on the bicycle, has nothing to do with gas at all, because she's on a bicycle surrounded by trees. But they're trying to tell the story that it's good new energy. It's pretending it's not a fossil fuel that's extracted normally from the global south and brought to the global north, or brought to Europe. The US has its own, and Australia. Oof. Anyway, And Shell here is providing more and cleaner energy. They're growing their fleet of LNG ships, and they love, showing all this high-tech stuff, the tubes and whatever to show that this is progress. And here, gas, confronting local air pollution, and SETIGAS, the Spanish Gas Association's commitment to the future. They look at any gas, they love showing, their colors are always blue and green. They love showing plants, leaves, all this stuff that has SETIGAS's logo of a little flower. All this stuff has nothing to do with gas, but they're trying to create this story. Another story they tell is gas is the future. It's human innovation at its best, bringing the world into the future. And here we see Chevron, she's looking at these screens with high-tech stuff on them. It's, like, obviously we've put so much money and technology into this, nothing could possibly go wrong. Powering the future through LNG. This is all these tubes and, whatever that special gas station is, that's the future. That's the world we're building. Naturgy asks us, again, with his lovely butterfly logo that has nothing to do with gas, if you could begin again, framing gas as, okay, we made a mistake with fossil fuels, but now we're going to get addicted to a new fossil fuel that's perhaps slightly cleaner, even though it's actually not. It's just methane. Or here, ExxonMobil telling us progress powered by natural gas. Okay, yeah, don't buy that. And a really important story that the fossil gas industry is telling in Europe especially, and perhaps around the world, is that gas is the solution to solving the climate change, solving the climate crisis, the solving change, which will still allow us to have unlimited growth, keep doing capitalism unchecked, blah, 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 blah. And this is particularly dangerous because a lot of industry, a lot of politicians, and a lot of the general public, because of this huge lobbying and misinformation campaign, are falling for this. And this is dangerous because every euro we spend on gas, or that is spent on gas, is a euro that's not spent on renewables. It's a distraction from a transition away from climate causing energy systems, not a transition to one. Here we are again, the plants, Gas Actual, talking about united together against climate change. And gas companies love to talk about how they're responsible, kind, and generous, sponsoring all sorts of random stuff that has nothing to do with gas, just to show that they're just those kind of good people that really just want to help everyone. That's why they're here. It's not because they're trying to make their shareholders and CEOs as rich as possible. It's because they love sponsoring young people who, can't, attend university otherwise. Here's an advertisement from Mexico, actually shared by an indigenous activist who's fighting a gas pipeline being built by TransCanada. And she saw this in her university, and it's TransCanada is actually, putting their logo over this, but giving scholarships to help people study. And it's like, well, hold on, this does not make up for the fact that you're about to tunnel through indigenous homelands to build a gas pipeline that's not needed. It's a distraction to this story. And that's how we need to understand a lot of the actions by industry, is they try to distract us with key details of their story. What % of TransCanada's profits actually go to funding educational projects? Another narrative being used specifically with national energy companies is that gas exploitation is a national right and a source of pride. YPF, the national Argentinian company that's now fracking the fuck out of Vaca Muerta and other places, check them out on YouTube. They've got some crazy videos. They've even had folks on soap operas talking about how great it is that they can be like providing this renewable energy future for their children. And their slogan here is proud of the product of our earth. So it's really kind of framing this nationalist view of like, this land is ours. We have the right to what's below it. But this methane doesn't care about the borders. It's a supercharged greenhouse gas, no matter which side of a boundary you're on. And Nigeria, think liquefied natural gas. Really trying to identify with this, trying to build that into their national identity, so that it becomes, so linked with your understanding, maybe noble understandings of patriotism, that you can't really separate the two in your mind anymore. But as we've said, gas is not a clean bridge fuel to a renewable energy future. Gas is methane, a supercharged greenhouse gas that's already underground. And more and more of these alarming infrared photographs are showing just how this methane is leaking all across the supply chain, from extraction to transport to combustion. And yes, when you burn methane or burn natural gas, it produces about half the CO2 emissions of coal. But first of all, comparing stuff to coal and saying it's half as bad is not a great barometer if we're trying to talk about serious climate action. And two, that's only talking about the CO2 emissions of the gas that's burned. The danger of gas is that what's not burned, it's what escapes. And especially if you look at fracking, these fracking rigs can leak methane, an invisible, odorless gas, for years without anyone realizing. There's way more methane rising into our atmosphere right now, precisely at the time when we do not need new supercharged greenhouse gases going there. So let's look at how movements are reframing the narrative and pushing back a little bit on the story being told by industry, because there's really inspiring examples. Here is a fake advertisement put up in Amsterdam to protest the FlameCon. It's an annual gas industry conference. Connecting natural gas causes natural disasters. This idea that gas is natural, it's like, well, yes, so is, coal is natural and oil is natural and cyanide is natural. Doesn't mean it's good. In a reframe, a lot of us have started talking about fossil gas, just as Fossil Gasfallen, a Swedish group that was successful in stopping an LNG terminal in Gothenburg quite recently. They built fossil gas into their name to make sure that the narrative stayed on, this is a fossil fuel. Don't be tricked. It's not separate from coal and gas, coal and oil. Some groups are talking about health and safety. Here is another subvertising action that happened in London, where they were trying to draw the attention to the dangers of earthquakes being caused by hydraulic fracturing, and how that can create health and safety damages to people. Water quality. Here's a fake ad by a group called the Yes Men, put up on public water fountains around New York, saying, this water is probably safe. If you're worried, try to light the water on fire, and if it catches fire, don't drink it, sort of thing. To draw attention of that fracking actually does this to people's water supply, and that's not a good way to be judging if it's safe or not. So water, especially around fracking, is a really powerful organizing tool, especially because of how basic it is in human and all life, survival of all life. Here at an action in Belgium, what will cook our planet? Gas, naturally. Pushing back on this idea that gas is good for the climate. And here at protesting the Kirk LNG terminal in Croatia, a group here, they've got this red line that they're using with 1.5 degrees C on it, showing how new fossil gas infrastructure is not compatible with the Paris Agreement. We cannot stay below 1.5 or 2 degrees of warming and keep exploiting methane. Coal to gas switch. Here's an action from the Netherlands where coal campaigners have been making the connection of saying, look, we can't be phasing out coal and while we're phasing in another fossil fuel. If we're going to make a jump to renewables, we actually have to get off of fossil fuels. It's not about switching from one fossil fuel to one that is, pretends to be a bit cleaner when it's actually just as bad. In Canada, groups are reframing on Indigenous sovereignty. saying, look, I don't care what you're trying to get out of the soil. It's not your soil to be messing with. This is indigenous land. You don't have permission to be here. Please go away. This is colonialism. In Italy, groups, I love this. They frame around like big useless projects because so many of these projects are just, excuses for industry to get public money, build the stuff, and whatever they build is good for the economy temporarily, whether or not it's ever actually used. And what we're seeing is massive funding going to new gas infrastructure, most of which is European LNG infrastructure, is used at less than half of its capacity. Why would we need to build more? But we see big useless projects, and that not widens the frame a bit. So you can actually be talking about any big useless project. It doesn't have to be a gas pipeline. It can be an oil pipeline or some new Amazon center or whatnot. Cool. And this is part of the NOTAP group fighting the mega pipeline from Azerbaijan to Italy. Groups are talking about repression and corruption in Italy, Mozambique, Croatia, and other places, saying, look, this is not, this is being imposed upon us. This is not something we want. Other groups here in Catalonia, we were fighting the MidCat pipeline, and we framed the debate really around North-South solidarity, saying we need to stop this pipeline here because it is going to bring fracked gas from Algeria to Europe. And if we don't allow fracking here, we cannot allow fracked gas to pass through our territory. Other groups in Ireland, a group called Not Here, Not Anywhere, built into its name this idea that, look, it's not that we're fighting gas because we don't want this LNG terminal built here. It's that we don't want this built anywhere. This is not acceptable in any way. Land rights in Mexico, groups have been framing it around the right to clean water, the right to land, the right to an indigenous homeland. Here, some actions from France with a very, very cool flaming banner, which I don't know how they did, but I want to know, are making the links along supply chains, highlighting the investment institutions, in this case, Société Générale, for the investments that they have in fracking in other parts of the world. Clear examples of neocolonialism. France, a country that has banned fracking, is allowing its corporations to fund it and extract in Algeria, its former colony, as well as Argentina, and is also involved in Mozambique and other places around the world. In an action from Lisbon, they built their own pipeline and brought it to a government office to protest that public money should not be going to build more fossil fuel infrastructure that needs constant inputs extracted from the global south when it's Portugal. Come on, put on solar panels. It's ridiculous. Other groups are reframing around fertilizers and the links to industrial agriculture. Here in the fantastic photo, please always have a good photographer when you do actions. Chemical fertilizer is made of fossil gas. Just pointing out the obvious that a lot of fossil gas is being used to make industrial fertilizers and plastics. So there's, you could focus in on that part of the story of what is this gas actually used for, is another, and then question, do we really need these plastics? Do we need industrial agriculture to be depleting our soils so rapidly? Other groups are focusing on democracy, saying, look, like 98.7% of people in Stratum agree they don't want this. Making it around consent, the right for communities to be deciding what kind of energy systems they have, who is operating on their land. And towards the end here, again, water, this idea of love oil, not water. That was recently, a few years ago, used with the water protectors of Standing Rock to reframe, not as we're not anti-pipeline, we're not protesters, we're water defenders. So remember, gas is not a companion to renewables, it is competition to renewables. And every euro spent on gas is not spent on renewables. And it is a distraction from a real, urgently needed transition to a renewable, sustainable, decentralized, community-run energy systems. And remember, they would frack your heart if they could. And, oops, I forgot to show the last slide, but here we go. Well, anyway, don't know what you're seeing right now because I've changed my screen, but hopefully you can see our website, gastivist.org, our Facebook, gastivist.com/gastivist, and our Instagram at Gastivist Collective. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Our favorite thing is helping people organize against gas. We've got tons of resources on our website if you want to see some videos and whatnot to learn a bit more. This is super strategic thing to be working on right now because of just how severe methane is, and that we really believe at Gastivist that if we can stop a new generation of fossil fuel infrastructure, if we can stop fossil gas, it's actually the end of the line for the fossil fuel industry. And that will create a lot of space for these democratic, decentralized, renewable energy systems we actually need. Okay, thank you so much for joining. Hopefully this was fun. Hopefully it worked. And yeah, get in touch. Have a good day. Bye-bye.